And I'm going to just introduce our session today. And it's going to be, what do you think about mental health care? And I'd like to present our two wonderful and dynamic speakers. Our introduction will be for Dr. Michelle Reed and Malkia Newman. Michelle Reed, MD, is the Chief Medical Officer of CNS Healthcare, a certified community behavioral health clinic in Michigan. She is a board-certified psychiatrist, and she was recently elected as a trustee at large of the American Psychiatric Association. Dr. Reed graduated from Fisk University and the Harry Medical College in Nashville, Tennessee. Woo-hoo, shout out to our HBCUs. She is a member of the Great Lakes chapter of the Links Incorporated and married to Eddie Lamar Harris, a retired healthcare executive. Our second speaker is Malkia Newman, Anti-Stigma team supervisor. Behavioral health conditions are common in Malkia's family. Struggles with her mental health led her to CNS Healthcare in 2004. Once she stabilized, she pursued a job with the CNS Healthcare Anti-Stigma Program in 2005. The peer-led program challenges stigmas and provides community education on a number of behavioral health topics. Using poetry and music, Malkia's story shows that hope and recovery is possible. The program has reached over 100,000 people in Detroit, Lansing, Marquette, Michigan, Washington, D.C., New York City, Houston, Las Vegas, San Antonio, Chicago, Phoenix, and Nova Scotia, Canada. So let's give a big shout out. You can put your reactions. If you can click on your reactions and say good morning to Dr. Michelle Reed and Malkia Newman. Thank you, ladies. Let's get started.
Thank you so much, Lorelei. Next slide, please. We wanted to welcome all of you here to our Great Girls Conference. We are among our monthly activities. We welcome parents and our students, and of course our Link sisters. So welcome, welcome everybody. Next slide, please. We are here celebrating a couple things this month. For those of you who may not know, September is actually National Recovery Month, and the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, that's responsible for planning and funding both mental health and substance abuse in the United States, every month in September celebrates National Recovery Month. And in light of that, that's one of our topics today is about recovery, and you'll hear a lot more about what recovery is from Malkia. Next slide, please. And Malkia, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. I'm going to be sharing with you my story, my recovery journey. So just buckle your seatbelts and hold on for the ride. Next slide, please. This was me at 18 months old. And I tell this story because it helps to set the tone for my particular situation. This is the earliest photo that was taken of me, and my mom told me later that when she took me to the photographer, she wondered, would he be able to make me smile? Because at 18 months old, I had never smiled. Now, if you think about childhood, most of us think babies come laughing and giggling. So if looking back, I realized that there was some things going on even from the time that I was born that let me know that I was having mental health issues. If they would have had childhood mental health in the 50s, I would have been a candidate for that. So I just want to go on to share with you my story. Do you see the elephant? You can stay on the last slide. I don't know when it started really, that uneasy feeling that something is wrong with my thinking, wrong with me, and wrong with my life. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows sadness It was a constant companion. From my late teens on, the disappointments grew like sand shifting through an hourglass. Pregnant out of wedlock, broken family relationships, and I was told it was all my fault. First marriage at 17. First divorce at 19. It was my baby, my Tracy. She's the only thing that kept me from taking my own life. I went to college. I had a 3.86 GPA, but I dropped out and never went back. When will I ever see the rainbow after the rain? That's when my quest began, but who could I tell? Who could I trust? Do you see what I see? Do you know what I know? Then came 12-step programs, individual, group therapy, even God in prayer. I tried so hard to get my life together, to get my life on track, but it just seemed like nothing would ever work. Then a friend told me about a little clinic in Pontiac, and I went there and zoned off, saved the day. I can see clearly now, the rain is gone. I believe I can fly. Whoo! Bipolar disorder. Out of all the mental health treatment conditions, is one of the easiest ones to treat. And those little blue pills, they made all the difference in the world until I got a job with benefits, which meant I lost my job with benefits, which meant I could no longer see a doctor or get my medication. I went back to the free clinic, but they no longer serve people with brain disorders, and they didn't even tell me where else I could go. Yet on the verge of another breakdown, a friend told me about CNS. I got new meds and a new place to stay. So by that following May, whoo, I feel good. I knew that I would. I felt so good. I stopped taking my medication and I went back into the toilet again. But I thank God I have wonderful doctors, just like Dr. Michelle, in my life, case managers, peers, people that encouraged me and supported me. So now I'm back on meds and back on track. And oh, by the way, would you like to work for CNS? So as you can see, having a mental health condition, it was not the end of the world. For me, it was only the beginning. Thank you very much. Next slide. Now we want to play a little game we call fact or fiction, which is just like true or false. We're going to ask you some questions, and we want you to go to the chat line to give us your answers. Is everybody ready? Next slide. Are most media portrayals of people with physical and mental challenges accurate? All right, girls, let us know what you think. Is this a true or a false statement?
Links you can answer too, please, and parents, everybody answer.
Looks like they're doing pretty good, Dr. Michelle.
I see a lot of falses coming in here. We'll give them a couple more seconds.
False.
Great job, great job. This is a false statement, but in actuality, it really does depend on what show or movie you're watching. There are some media producers that like to accentuate physical and mental health challenges for entertainment value, but there are some shows and some movies that do give accurate depictions of what it's like living with a mental health condition. One of my favorites is Monk. When he went off the air, I cried because he was one of my favorite detectives. He always saved the day, but he also had to struggle with OCD. So next, you did great, everybody. Next question. Let's see how you do on the next one. Next slide. Does culture play a role in how a person relates to mental health conditions? What do you think, guys? True or false? Da, na, 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 na. Da na 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 da 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 da. Looking pretty good. Dr. Michelle, have they seen this presentation before? They get
I don't think so.
well. We'll give you a few more minutes, but you're doing great, guys. You're right. The answer is true. In fact, in some cultures, the stigma or discrimination that people face who have mental health conditions is so strong that they don't just discriminate against the person who has a diagnosis. In some cultures, they relegate the whole family to a place of poverty that they're never able to rise above. And if you, in some cultures, if you're a single young lady and you hope to get married one day and you started to experience problems with your mental health, you wouldn't tell anybody. No one would marry you. And that's sad, but that's true. And sometime back, there was a young lady that used to work with us at CNS. Her heritage is Hmong, Southeastern Asian. And we were having the culture and mental health conversation at work one day. And she said, you know, Malkia, in our language, there's no word for mental health at all. The closest thing we have to it is I'm feeling sad today. So if someone sat down next to you and said, I'm feeling sad, would you think about schizophrenia or bipolar disorder? I wouldn't. So we really do have to consider how a person's cultural background impacts the way that they ask for help, receive for help, and whether or not they can even go for help. Next slide, please. You're doing great, guys. Does spending too much time on electronic devices harm your mental health? That's a good question. Let's see what they say, Dr. Michelle.
It looks like they're getting it. They're getting it.
Wow.
Yes, it could, Nyla.
Absolutely, absolutely. They have been doing studies, and the researchers have found that people who spend too much time connected to electronic devices are starting to develop the same symptoms of depression. Difficulty with sleep, difficulty with eating, just so many different things that Dr. Reed is going to go into later on in the conversation. But it's important for us to distance ourselves, not to be constantly on our electronic devices, because it definitely will harm your mental health. Next slide. Now we're going to ask you some questions about 3 different scenarios just to see what you would do. This is not true or false. This is a multiple choice, so you get a chance to choose your answers. Everybody ready? You've been a great audience so far, so let's see how you do on what would you do. Next slide. What would you do if you saw a group of kids bullying someone? Would you A, do nothing, B, tell another student, C, confront the person doing the bullying, or D, tell your teacher, counselor, parent, or administrator?
And I see we're getting half and half. People are choosing between confronting the person doing the bullying or tell the teacher, counselor, parent, or administrator, about half and half.
Well, in actuality, it's really best to go to a parent or an administrator and let them navigate that situation with you, because you do not want to put yourself in harm's way if it's at all possible. Sometimes, especially when you get into a crowd situation, it could turn ugly. So you don't want to put yourself in harm's way. Get a trusted adult to help you with that situation. But I admire your courage if you're one of the ones that want to go and confront. But sometimes that's not always wise. Great answers. Thank you. Next question. What would you do? What would you do if someone you know offered you drugs? A, do nothing. B, tell another student. C, ignore the person. Or D, tell somebody.
And again, mostly D's, but a few C's.
Okay. Well, again, D is the preferred answer. Sometimes ignoring the person may not be enough, depending on if that person is a persistent person. And we believe that the ladies that are involved in this are strong leaders in and of themselves. So you may be able to ignore that person and move on, but you do still want to let a trusted adult know, because drugs is not something you want in your school, even though we know that they do come in. But the administration and the teachers and parents do need to know when there's drugs on the campus. So thank you. You're doing great, ladies. Let's see what you'll do in this last scenario. What would you do if you saw a classmate physically abused by their significant other? Do nothing, tell another student, confront the person, or again, tell somebody. Looks like they got it all right.
The links and the girls.
Yes, yes. Is just the only caution with confronting people. We want to make sure, again, that you don't put yourself in harm's way. Having someone trusted to assist you in that would be a better way to handle it. And another thing too, you want to support the individual that's being abused. Let them know there's no judgment, that you still want to stand with them, but you want to help them get out of a bad situation. You ladies did excellent on both quizzes. So now we'll go on to the next. But thank you so much for all your answers. Next slide.
Oh, and one thing, just remind everybody, any questions you have, just type them in the chat and we'll integrate them right into the presentation. So type away, please ask your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Michelle. So now we want to talk about stigma. The name of the program that I work with is an Anti-Stigma Program, and very often people will say, well, what is stigma? Stigma is judging people or discriminating against people for conditions that you feel are unacceptable. A good example of that would be substance use disorders or mental health conditions, but it's not limited to that. So what comes along with that discrimination or feeling that the people are less than? People feel disgraced. They're shamed. They feel a lack of disrespect and a strong disapproval from those that are around them. And what makes it so bad when a person is stigmatized against by, let's start with professional people first, then it makes it difficult for them to believe that they're able to do anything good and positive with their life. When we go to our doctors and psychiatrists and other professionals, we look to them for guidance and encouragement. And if they're stigmatizing or treating you poorly for the condition that you're presenting, then it makes it difficult for you to have that kind of confidence in that relationship. And it's such a very vital relationship. And if there's stigma in your family, it causes a divide in the family members. Mental health conditions and substance use conditions are some of the most difficult conditions because they don't just affect the person who has the illness, it affects the whole family. So when there's stigma within the family, it makes it difficult for the person who has a disorder to get the help that they need. And it makes it difficult for the family to support that person in their quest for recovery. And then the person who has the illness, if they're experiencing stigma from all these different places, they start internalizing that. You start to feel that you're not a good person, that is something wrong with you, that you can't rise above the circumstance that you find yourself in. Just like the picture says, stigma hurts everyone. So that's why CNS is so committed to my program that they send us all over the country. At least pre-COVID, we went all over the country. Now we're doing it virtually. But we're so committed that we would talk to a stick or a brick if it stood still long enough to listen, to enlist you in this fight to help us stop our stigma. Next slide, please. But stigma is not just felt by people with mental health conditions and substance use disorders. Everyone in one way or another may experience stigma. All these things that are listed are just a scattering of different ways that people treat people badly. And it's unfair. It's not right. And we need to be the ones that stand up and say, no, I'm not going to be the one to treat people bad for situations that they didn't ask for and many times don't even want. Next slide, please. Now we want to talk about people first language. And when we're talking about people first language, we are making a decision that when we're referring to a person who has an illness, that we don't label them with the illness. And what do I mean by that? In mental health circles, a lot of times it's very common for people to say, you're bipolar, they're schizophrenic. But when you do that, you label that person to the negative traits that people associate with that illness. And you never go beyond that to find out, what is the person like? What are their dreams? What are their goals? What are their aspirations? And when I first came into this work, it confused me too, because I knew I had bipolar, so I didn't see anything wrong with saying I am bipolar. But then I learned, if people think negatively about people with bipolar disorder, that's all they would see about me. And there's so much more to me than that. I'm a poet, I'm a singer, I'm a licensed ordained minister, I'm a mother, a grandmother, a wife, a good friend. There's a lot of good things about me that far outweigh my diagnosis. So when you refer to people who have illnesses, they just want to be referred to as a person first and not that illness. And our little cartoon really helps to bring this out. The gentleman on the left is kneeling and he says, so what do you prefer? Being called differently able, physically challenged, or gravity impaired? And the gentleman in the wheelchair says, what's wrong with Joe? His name is Joe. He wants to be called by his name and saw as a person first and not just a disability. Next slide, please. So what can we all do to stomp out stigma? This is our call to arms. We want to empower you to be on this anti-stigma team. First and foremost, kindness and compassion. Everybody's going through a struggle, especially now in this COVID-19 situation that we find ourselves in. We don't know the struggles that people are going through. So when we can treat people with kindness and compassion, it makes it easier for that person to move on. We can also advocate on behalf of people who have challenges, whether they're physical or mental. If you hear people calling people by labeling them by their illness, just let them know, that's not a kind thing to do, to call them bipolar or schizophrenic. They're a person first. Call them by their name. And then educate yourself about mental health and substance use disorders. The more you understand, especially if you have a family member that's struggling in these areas, the more you understand the illness that they're dealing with, and it is an illness, a medical condition that can be treated. It's not a character flaw. It's not a weakness on the part of the individual. The more you understand that, the better you can support them on their recovery journeys. Next slide, please. Stress, grief, and loss. We wanted to touch on these things, especially now that we're all going through this COVID-19 situation. And our young lady here, she's totally overwhelmed. We don't know if she's in school or if she's at work, but sometimes things can press in on you so much that you need to seek help from another source. There's so many different ways that you can do that. But first of all, you need to know that grief and loss, especially during this COVID-19 situation we find ourselves in, is a very normal response. We've all lost some things during these past few months. People have lost loved ones. People have lost incomes. We have lost our freedom to a certain extent. We don't know how long it's going to be before we'll get back to normal, whatever that looks like. And you need to be kind to yourself and grieve your losses. Recognize that something significant, something traumatic has happened. And it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to cry. It's okay. We don't have to be strong all the time. Take the cape off and quit wearing that Supergirl t-shirt, because sometimes we need to reach out to someone trusted, friends, family members, clergy, people that we trust, that we can let them know, I'm struggling. I'm not feeling well today. I thought it was so commendable of former First Lady Michelle Obama when she publicly came out and said, I've been experiencing some depression. There's some very real things going on, losses and traumas that we're experiencing individually, in our families, and as a nation. And we need to know, first of all, that our reactions are normal, that getting help is a strength and not a weakness, and we will get through this. But we sometimes will need help to do it. Next slide, please. So where do we go from here? We've talked a lot about mental health conditions, how they affect people, what you can do to get help. That is normal, and you can be an advocate. It may seem like overwhelming, especially if you find yourself right now in a place where you're experiencing a little sadness or going through grief or loss at this moment. But one thing you don't want to do is let it paralyze you. I love this saying by Dr. Martin Luther King. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But by all means, keep moving. Every little thing you do to move you forward takes you further away from that place that you find yourself in. So whatever you do, keep moving. Next slide.
Malkia, we have a question.
Yeah.
How do you talk to your parents or family if you think you might be experiencing some mental health issues?
That's a great question. That's a great question. And it depends on your relationship within your family. Hopefully, your parents are open and they listen to you when you express concerns. Let them know that you're having feelings that you don't understand. And then try to be understanding of your parents too, because when young people start getting into their teenage years, it's so easy to say, oh, that's just normal teenage behavior. It doesn't have to be. So if you go to them and explain to them what's going on and let them know that you think you might need to talk to someone and they support you in that, hallelujah. But sometimes parents don't always support in that. Sometimes it's difficult for parents to see that there's something else going on. So you may have to enlist an ally to help you. You may have to go to a grandparent, an aunt, a teacher, someone trusted, an adult to help you explain to your parents what's going on with you. It's so vitally important that you do that, that you don't give up, that you keep letting it be known that there's something going on that you really need help addressing, and you think it's more than what the family can handle on your own. Keep letting that be at the forefront of the conversation. Don't give up, because eventually someone is going to support you in getting you to where you need to be. But keep asking, keep knocking, don't give up. Just like I just said, keep moving in that direction. One of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this work is because I started experiencing depression and suicidal thoughts in my teens when I was still in high school. And it plagued me my whole adult life. And I was in my 40s by the time I found out what was wrong with me. And I don't want anyone to have to go a whole lifetime and struggle with their mental health when there's so many good supports available. The medications are not like they used to be. It's no need for anyone to suffer. I want to stress that more than anything else. Please don't suffer. Ask for help. Don't be ashamed to ask for help. I hope that answered the question.
Yes.
Any more questions, Dr. Michelle?
Not at this time.
Okay, then we'll go on. But thank you for that. Thank you for asking. That was a powerful question. Next slide. live life in balance. And that's not always easy to do, because especially now we're juggling a lot of things and we're confined. So that makes it even worse. But we do need to try to take care of all of the different parts of us. We're very complex beings. We're not just women. We're students. We're daughters. We're mothers, and we have to balance all of that. And sometimes it's not easy. So you want to make sure you make time and space for all the little different parts of yourself. You want to take care of yourself physically. You want to take care of yourself mentally. You want to take care of your emotions and your spiritual life. All of it's connected. Your social life. Even though we're required to social distance, that doesn't mean not to interact and maintain relationships. Everything needs to be done in balance, because if you lean too far one way or another way, then it's going to cause the other areas in your life to suffer. And it's just like riding a bike. You got to hold on and balance yourself, and then you can move on. But if anything's out of balance, you're going to fall off the bike. Go ahead.
Malkia, we got a question in the group chat. And
yes.
They ask, you're talking about social with life in balance. Could you address the isolation and loneliness that many of us have experienced since COVID-19? We've basically been in Michigan on lockdown for the last 6 months.
Yes, and that is difficult. And one of the things that I noticed is that people are starting to be more creative, and we're going back to doing some of the things we used to do before electronics took over our lives. We're connecting through electronic means like this. This is important, but you can also write letters to people. Phone calls are important. Looking in and checking on your neighbors, checking on friends, texts. Any way you can reach out and touch somebody, do that. Because you never know how important that might be. One thing I've learned, when something comes to mind, like if a person comes to my mind, I want to either pray for that person or reach out to that person, because it's a reason that they're coming into my consciousness. We're connected by people. We're social beings. We weren't designed to live in isolation. That's why this is so difficult for most of us, if not all of us, to handle, because we enjoy people. Even if we're introverted, we still want to be around people at times. But we're talking about balance. We have to do it in balance. If you're in social situations, you want to mask up. You want to do the things that are required to help to keep the pandemic down, but also meet the needs that you have for that to break out of that isolation. Do it in smaller groups. Do as much outside as you can, but be wise in everything that you do. Protect yourself, wash your hands, all the things that they're recommending. But being isolated is not a good thing, and anything that you can do that you're comfortable doing to break out of that, do that. But do it with safety and moderation. That's a wonderful ring. Not sure what that meant. Do we have any more questions, Dr. Michelle?
I think that was the next slide song.
Okay, next slide. Fall in love with taking care of yourself, mind, body, and spirit. Self-care is absolutely critical during this time. And we're not just talking about spa days and massages. Taking care of yourself is taking care of everything about you. I love my manis and pedis. I was absolutely thrilled when I could start going back and getting them done. But sometimes it also means taking a walk in nature. I bought I can't remember what you call them, but you put the scented oils in it and it vaporizes and puts a fragrance in the room. That helps. I get
aromatherapy.
Aromatherapy. Thank you. I go on YouTube, and I love those videos where they have the nature sounds and the music. It helps to change your mood. Simple things like that. It doesn't always cost money to take care of yourself, but just realizing and recognizing that you have to take care of you. And I always liken it to when we're on planes and they always give you the story about the air mask coming down. They always tell you, put your mask on first and then try to help someone else. When you take care of yourself, you're putting your mask on, you're building yourself up so that you have the strength and the creativity and the talent and whatever you need, because we're all special and unique. We all have something marvelous to give this world, and you want to be able to be at your best to do it. So you can do that when you take care of yourself, put on your mask, and then help others. Next slide. Be yourself. I love this. Everyone else is taken. You are special, and not that funny kind of special that people use sometimes. You are unique. Just like in nature, there's no two flowers exactly alike, no two snowflakes exactly alike. We were created the way we were for a special purpose. And when we fall in love with us and start celebrating us and being comfortable in our own skin, then we're able to be the gift to the world that we were created to be. Be yourself, your beautiful self, your wonderful self, because everyone else is taken. Next slide. And don't be afraid to change directions. If you find that you're going down a path that you're not comfortable with, that doesn't seem to be benefiting you or giving you the outcomes that you're looking for with your life, you can change your direction. You can change your mind. It's a medically proven fact that even if you've been exposed to trauma and negativity, that having positive thoughts and changing your perspective, changing your relationships, making positive changes in your life helps to heal your brain. So you want to be able to be free to change your mind and change your direction. We're not locked into negativity and moving down a wrong path. We have the freedom to choose, and it's a wonderful freedom. Don't be afraid to change. That's one of the constants in life. Change is always going to be there. Sometimes it's hard to navigate. We get uncomfortable with it, but change is always going to be there.
Malkia, do you
Yes.
think online school is messing with students' mental health?
That is an excellent question. I'm not an educator, but I'll just say from my own perspective that because of the fact, again, no two people are alike. Some people are probably thriving in this online environment that we find ourselves in, but there are others that aren't because they need the social interaction. So it's a difficult place. It's unfortunate. All we can do is look to our parents and our educators to try to direct us and help us as much as possible within the confines, because we have to juggle between safety and health and education. And that's a hard balancing act to balance. But one of the things that you need to do, either as a student or a parent, if you're having difficulties, let people know. Don't just suffer in silence. If you're having difficulty with the online experience, let your parents know, let your teachers know, so that they can find ways to supplement. Because going back into the classroom isn't an option for you right now, we have to do what we can to supplement that experience, because safety is key. We want to make sure that the students are safe as well as learning. And I think I saw another question, Dr. Michelle, come
Well,
through.
one question is about medication, and I'll answer that one. Is medication the only way to treat mental health conditions? Absolutely not. The majority of people who have mental health conditions have mild to moderate conditions that are mostly successfully treated with psychotherapy. So very often, after just 12 weeks of individual or group therapy, depression and anxiety can be markedly improved. And also for milder forms of depression, there are many things that have been found to have a benefit. Number one, exercise. So walking, exercise is a treatment for some mild form of depression. And there are various supplements that are available that also work for depression and other disorders. Vitamin D can be associated with depressed mood, so taking vitamin D. And there are other things like St. John wort, SAMe, over-the-counter botanical type medications can be associated. Malkia talked about aromatherapy. Biofeedback has been shown to be helpful. Yoga, meditation, mindfulness, many things are associated primarily with the treatment of mild to moderate mental disorders at the beginning. So medication is more for the more severe forms of mental disorders, but there are many self-care and other things that people can do that will help their mental health.
Music and art therapy are good as well. Yeah. Next slide, please. You may have made some mistakes and you may not be where you want to be, but that's got nothing to do with your future. I love this quote. It's nothing to do with your future. And I'm sure you can see there's gray hair, that I have gray hair, so I've been around a while. And I used to beat myself up unmercifully about the mistakes that I had made in life. But I've come to realize in my golden years that what I considered was a mistake was really a life lesson that I could learn from, that I could glean from, and that I could use to help someone else along the way. So I'm to a point in my life where I don't feel like anything that's happened in my life has been a bad thing. Even some of the most difficult parts of my past have helped to prepare me for where I am right now. And if I had to change anything, I wouldn't change anything. Even those years that I went undiagnosed, I wouldn't change that, because it's made me a lot more effective as an advocate, and it makes me empathetic to others who suffer. So if you've made mistakes, and we all have, pick yourself up, dust yourself up, and go on, because that's got nothing to do with your future. Next slide. Let go of the past so you can move on. That's critical. I just got to saying I used to beat myself up, and my daughter was very wise. I used to feel bad because of the childhood that she had, and the fact that I had to divorce her father when she was young, and so many other things. And she said, you know, Mom, I wouldn't be who I am if my dad wasn't my dad, if you weren't my mom, and if I hadn't gone through the experiences I went through. She was wise when she's always been a wise person. So I've learned to let go of my past. It's healing in that. It gives you strength to handle the now, the present, and courage to face your future. Somebody told me a good illustration once why it's so important to let go. In your car, when you're looking at your rearview mirror, it's only this big, but your windshield goes all the way across the front of your car, because you don't need to spend your time looking back in that little rear view mirror. You need to spend the majority of your time looking forward in that big windshield, facing front, facing life, moving on, and being that wonderful person that you were created to be. Next slide. I love this. A diamond is cold that handle pressure extremely well. Be a diamond. And I think this is very appropriate in this COVID-19 situation, because we're all handling pressure right now. But when we come through the outside of this experience, we're all going to be better people. Even though it's been difficult, even though we've suffered losses, I'm not minimizing that at all. But I do know that coal turns to diamonds, oil, all those precious metals and things all have to go through a pressure process.
I love to make money. I don't like spending it. I like it made.
Be a diamond. Next slide. So with this, I'm going to conclude my portion of this conversation. But before I go, I'd like to just do my brief tribute to you, the links and the girls that are on this line, because of the fact that I know we've been surviving, not just surviving, but we've been thriving in a difficult situation. We've been doing what's been asked of us, and some of us have had to do even more, go over and above. And because of that, I consider you a hero. You may not be what they call a essential worker, but if you're doing your homework, if you're doing your chores, if you're helping out with your siblings, then you are a hero because you're doing your part to help the family move forward. Just like on your job, if you're working and you're doing your part, you're helping your organization move forward, because we could have all just laid down and did nothing, but we chose to stand up and move forward. So with that, I just want to give this short tribute to you and sing the hero song. There's a hero. If you look inside your heart, you don't have to be afraid of who you are. There's an answer if you search within yourself, and the emptiness you felt will disappear. And then a hero comes along with the strength to carry on, and you cast your fears aside, and you know you will survive. So when you feel like hope is gone, look inside you and be strong, and you'll finally see the truth that a hero lies in you. And then a hero comes along with the strength to carry on, and you cast your fears aside, and you know you can survive. So when you feel like hope is gone, look inside you and be strong, and you'll finally see the truth that a hero lies in you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Malkia. Next slide, please. Thank you, Cheryl. There is no health without mental health. Next slide, please. We also wanted to let you know that September is National Suicide Prevention Month, and the teal and the purple is used to celebrate, to have the entire community engage with us, with mental health advocates that Malkia told you about, with prevention organizations, survivors of suicide, people who have attempted suicide but lived, and as Malkia talked about, the allies and community members such as you, to basically join together, all of us, to encourage and prevent suicide prevention and awareness by bringing attention to this during the month of September. Next slide, please.
Dear Kimarian.
Dear Allie, my name is April and a lot has happened to me. I was involved in 2 human trafficking rings that both made the news. At 22 years old, my father passed away, and that is when I was on a suicide mission, and I started taking pain pills, smoking crack cocaine, and drinking to run from all the pain that I felt inside of me.
You've been through a lot in your 20 years of life. You've dodged death more times than you can count. Watched people close to you die firsthand, dealing with your ADHD, your trauma, and also attempted suicide are only the tip of the icebergs. But you have also persevered through all of it.
I was in and out of treatment for several years. Finally, in 2017, something clicked in me. I started to look at my life in a different light. Instead of why me, I was like, why not me? I allowed everything that I had been through to empower me, and that I made it out alive. I am a survivor.
I know sometimes it's hard to be happy, and it's hard to keep going. I think everyone should try to remind themselves that every hour that you keep breathing means you're doing something amazing.
You have a vision you want to pursue. You have to set an example for your siblings. My advice to you is keep your past at your side so you can look back on it for reference. Stay in the present because you might miss something important, and look forward to the future. Anything is possible.
However frustrating it may be, I cannot control anyone else's thoughts, actions, or feelings. I can only control myself and what I choose to do with my own thoughts, actions, and feelings.
Sincerely, yourself. My name is Kimarian.
My name is Allie.
My name is April.
And this is not my suicide note.
Next slide, please. So suicide is something, as you heard, that goes on here in Michigan, and you heard from 3 survivors. And often people will describe that they feel like they're a burden. And also we talked a little bit earlier about feeling isolated can be part of suicidal thoughts and ideations. Also, people will complain about increased anxiety and being trapped or in some sort of unbearable pain, as you heard the 3 individuals who shared their stories with you just on the film before this. Next slide, please. Also, when people are feeling suicidal, as you heard Crystal talk about increased substance abuse, you hear her taking painkillers and she was using cocaine. Also, looking for a way to access legal means, whether it's an overdose or a gun. People who are feeling suicidal will start looking for ways to access a means to end their life. And also, sometimes there could be a lot of anger and rage, and also extreme mood swings. Next slide, please. Also, people have hopeless, helpless, and worthless ideation. The first speaker on the little film before talked about feeling hopeless, that she had no means to get out of her situation. Also, you can see people that they're either sleeping too much or not sleeping at all. They have horrible insomnia, or just the opposite, they stay in the bed all day, every day. And also, you'll see people start to post about or talk about wanting to die. This is very common. And also, people actually go on to make plans for suicide about how they may die. This is a warning sign that we need to pay attention to. Next slide, please. Also, if you see for children and teens, maybe not the same as what you would see in adults, but what you often see is changes in eating or sleeping habits. All of a sudden, there's no appetite. They don't want to eat their favorite foods. Or on the other hand, they're constantly eating or sleeping too much or sleeping too little. And Malkia talked to you about her frequent and pervasive sadness. When she looks back on her life at 18 months, she wasn't smiling. So there's also a sadness, and also withdrawing from friends, family, or regular activities that they enjoy doing. Like if they like to roller skate, they're not interested in skating, or they like to go to the library, they're not doing that anymore. And also, what we find in teens and children who are feeling suicidal, they often have frequent complaints of physical symptoms related to their emotions. You know, they talk about stomach aches, headaches, and fatigue. Very, very common. Next slide, please. Also, a decline in the quality of schoolwork. You know, we had a little question earlier. Petra talked about being in online school. So all of a sudden, A students are suddenly getting C's and D's, or they're not interested, not completing their homework. Also, a preoccupation with death and dying. We've all lost so many people, have friends in the hospital, and all of a sudden, children and teens become preoccupied with death and dying. And also, one of the signs of suicide is to start giving away cherished possessions. It's suddenly you feel that you're not going to be around anymore, and you're giving away your cherished possessions, and you stop talking about your future. You don't talk about looking forward to going to school or going to college next year or getting a car or getting your driver's license. So they stop talking about the future. Next slide, please. So does asking people about thoughts of suicide increase suicidal ideation? Absolutely not. I had a situation where a friend of mine recently called me about his daughter, and he was saying that his daughter was having a lot of stress at school. She was in college, and he asked her, were you thinking about harming yourself? And she told him that she had, and he was able to call me, and I was able to work with him to help get some help for her. She wanted to see a therapist, so she was able to talk to her father about. But actually, about a quarter of teens who actually attempted suicide using a firearm really had spent less than 5 minutes planning the act. The majority of suicide attempts, it took less than an hour. So actually, 3/4 of the time when an adolescent ended up dying by suicide, the gun had come from the home of a relative or a family member. So very often talking to the pediatrician, talking to a family member or a friend actually can help cut down and stop a suicide attempt. Next slide, please. So we have some questions for the chat for everybody, parents, students, and links. Answer this question. It is very difficult to predict who will kill themselves since most kids who die by suicide do not communicate their intentions. True or false? I see a lot of truths there, a lot of truths. That is true. We really cannot predict who is going to die by suicide, but very often there are signs that people are having problems. So again, not doing homework, sleeping too much, eating too much. Although these are not things that definitively will say that, but there are red flags that would go up. But it is true, we are not able to accurately predict who is going to die by suicide, but people who die by suicide ordinarily have many attempts before they die by suicide. So a person who's had a history of suicide attempts, that's also a red flag. Another question, would it be helpful to ask a young person who appears overly depressed and withdrawn, grief-stricken, whether she's ever considered suicide as a solution to her problems? Is that a good thing to do? I see a sign on. Nyla.
Yeah.
Kelly.
Lots of yeses.
Tatiana. Absolutely.
Yes.
Talking to a person about feelings of suicide does not increase the chance of them dying by suicide. In fact, it enhances the chance of them getting help. Just like my friend was able to ask his daughter, and she very openly told him she was facing some very serious decisions, a breakup of a relationship and some difficulty in college. And she was glad that her father asked her, and she was very willing to have help. So absolutely, asking does not make somebody more likely to make a suicide attempt. In fact, it makes it less likely that there will be an attempt.
Right.
For parents or students, if you saw your child or your sister or brother's depression, and all of a sudden they're no longer talking about being depressed and talking about suicidal behavior or thoughts, and suddenly this individual becomes very happy and relieved, you think that the crisis has passed. Jada,
Great
Amina,
answers. Great answers.
Morgan, and Gabrielle, Neutrina, you are absolutely right.
Yes.
There's a very key time in a person who has been chronically suicidal and depressed to suddenly become very happy and relieved and stop talking about it. Often that could be a sign that they have pondered and made a decision about how they will die and when they will die. So this is a high risk time that we should keep our eye on. If people who have been chronically complaining about depression and suicide just stop talking about it and seem totally back to normal, that is a warning sign that they may have made their mind up that they will die by suicide. Next slide, please.
Good job.
Most young people who die by suicide have made a clear decision that death is their best option.
So far, it looks half and half.
Yes. Well, Jada and Lorelei and Amina, you are right. As we talked earlier, very often in the case of teens, the suicide attempt is more of an impulsive action. Most people have not really thought out all the options. I mean, you heard Malkia talked about herself having suicidal ideation and thoughts about wanting to die, even as a teen, but it was not until her adulthood that she actually sought any help for these problems. So very often, it is not a well thought out plan. As we said, sometimes procuring a gun or some other lethal means may have only occurred 5 or 10 or 15 minutes or an hour before the act. So very often it's not a well thought out, clear decision that death is the best option. People are not looking at the impact on the family, impact to the friends. And you heard Malkia talk about, she did not die by suicide, although she may have had an attempt because of her concern over her daughter, Tracy. So very often it's not a well thought out, organized plan. If you see extraordinary aggressiveness and hostility, hyperactivity, sexual promiscuity, and extreme risk taking, could these be signs of impending suicide attempts? True or false?
Doing great.
Amina, Tatiana, Morgan, you all are absolutely right.
Yes.
A change from a person's baseline behavior very often can be a sign of extreme risk taking, which would make a person more prone to be dying by suicide or to make a suicide attempt. So somebody who has been depressed, thinking about suicide, all of a sudden they're getting angry, they're very aggressive, they're taking risks that they shouldn't take, driving cars and things like that. That can be a sign of an impending suicide attempt. Good job, Nyla.
Great job. Great
Leah.
job.
Great job. Next
Are
slide.
you sure they haven't seen this presentation before? They're getting the questions right.
Very good. Okay. Talking to your teen about
I need to figure out
suicide.
when to ask an adult for help. If I look stressed, I may need help.
Talk about secrets with your teenager and explain there are some secrets that are too dangerous to keep.
Emma, can we talk to you for a minute?
Is everything okay? It seems like something's on your mind.
It's just, I don't know, I'm fine.
You seem a little off today. Did something happen?
Hannah, she tries to.
You can tell us, hon.
Hannah tried to hang herself. Her parents stopped her.
Oh, honey, I'm so sorry.
Is she okay? I think so. She's in the hospital.
You okay?
She told me if I said anything, she would never forgive me.
What do you mean?
She said she was depressed and she was thinking about suicide. But she promised me she wouldn't do anything if I didn't tell anyone.
Oh, sweetheart, that was an unfair situation you were put in. You shouldn't have to go through that alone. And sometimes when people are feeling hopeless, they think that suicide is their only solution.
But why would she do it? I tried to help her.
Emma?
She lied to me.
Emma, this is not your fault. Now, you're a great friend. You've never been in this situation before.
I don't know.
Yeah. Sometimes when friends ask us to keep secrets like this, it can seem like there's no right choice to make.
Yeah, I really didn't know what to do.
Yeah. Well, do you think you would feel comfortable talking to us if something like this happened again?
I think so. This really scared me.
I know it may seem strange, but we're here for you, especially if you're worried about a friend's safety. You can always talk to us. We don't want you to deal with situations like this alone.
Teenagers sometimes get caught in social situations that they can't solve alone.
I don't get why somebody would want to kill themselves. Why would she do it?
Sometimes when a person gets depressed, problems, they pile up and they just can't see a way out.
But wouldn't she get help?
It's not easy to get help sometimes when you're depressed.
What would you do? You felt helpless like that?
Probably come talk to you guys or one of my counselors at school. They're nice.
That's great.
Sometimes when I feel sad, I just go outside and run or play basketball.
Have you talked to Hannah?
I was thinking about it, but I don't know. It just feels weird. I'm kind of worried.
Worried about what?
I don't know. It's just weird. She lied to me, and I'm still mad at her.
Well, your father and I will talk to her parents, and then maybe we can go and see her. Would that be okay?
I guess.
Remember, Hannah needs our support right now. Maybe she thought she had a better handle on her suicidal feelings. We don't know if she was lying. The doctors and her parents are going to take good care of her.
That's right. We're proud of you. You know that.
Not every day.
Next slide, please.
Suicide is the second leading cause of death among 10 to 19-year-olds. Nationally, we lose more than 2,000 children and teens per year.
To put that into context, we think about 9/11, where we lost 3,000 individuals, and every 18 months, we basically have another 9/11. We have really an obligation to do more to prevent this national public health issue.
You can approach suicide prevention the same way you do other safety or health issues with your child. Dr. John Ackerman with Nationwide Children's Hospital says it's safe to directly ask your child, have you ever considered ending your life?
Talking to a young person directly about suicide does not increase their risk for suicide, but it does really increase the chances that they'll talk to us and get help that they need.
I had that direct conversation. When I was 13, I ran away from home. When I got home, my parents asked me that same thing. They asked me if I was considering suicide, and I flat out said yes. Because of that, it was easier to talk to them.
Dr. Ackerman is partnering with schools to keep the conversation going in the classroom.
It's really important for us to start this conversation early and to work specifically with schools and talk to parents, because really 50% of mental health issues start by the age of 14.
If you don't ask, you'll look back and be like, it's too late. You never want to have a it's too late moment.
At Nationwide Children's Hospital, this is Nikki Chave reporting.
Next slide, please. So one thing that Malkia talked with you about was about trauma. And trauma does play a role in the development of depression and suicidal ideation in all sort of mental health issues and substance use disorders. We call these adverse childhood experiences. There's actually a scale that we use, and we're looking for abuse, both physical, emotional, and sexual, as well as any sort of physical or emotional neglect, and any household dysfunction. I mean, Malkia talked about her own divorce and the issues she was having and how household dysfunction can have an impact on children. Mental illness could be a cause, any violence towards the mother, a divorce, substance abuse, as you heard the lady talk about earlier, And actually having a parent incarcerated can be considered to be a trauma. Next slide, please. Also, these adverse childhood experiences, we talked about the 3 types. Next slide, please. They are things that can be overcome, as Malkia talked to you about resilience and recovery, but physical abuse and sexual abuse play a large part of it, as well as emotional neglect. Next slide, please. And we find that this household dysfunction and having a look at ACEs, next slide please, can result in health challenges for people. So the more ACEs you have, the increased risk there is for negative health outcomes. Next slide please. As a result of these adverse childhood experiences, we heard talk about reduced physical activity, increased smoking, increased alcohol and drug use, increased missing work. On the physical and mental health side, people who have high levels of adverse childhood experiences have severe obesity. They're more likely to have depression and diabetes. They're more likely to have suicide attempts. They're more likely to have heart disease, cancer, stroke, and broken bones. Next slide, please. So the whole issue is that adverse childhood experiences can result in early death if they're not addressed. Next slide, please. So in order for us to address these adverse childhood experiences, you heard Malkia talk about the role of resilience. You know that she's a minister, so her spiritual background was something that was a strength to her, that she was able to look at her challenges and the disturbances she had, but she was able to rebound from it. All of these things allow you to adapt and to be flexible and to grow resourcefulness. So as Tracy said, if she hadn't been through the experiences she had been, she wouldn't be the person she was today. So although one may have many adverse childhood experiences, these do not need to be barriers to move ahead. Next slide, please. What are barriers to getting help? I mean, you heard Malkia talk about a lack of knowledge. She said one time told me we have something called infant mental health, and she said if that had been around when she was there, she probably could have been there, a program for people from 0 to 6 years old. Stigma that Malkia talked with you about is sometimes a barrier to getting help, distrusting the health system, and also primarily people say they don't know where to call to get help. Next slide, please. They just don't know where to call. Also, sometimes people are looking for providers from diverse ethnic and racial backgrounds and more culturally competent providers. And often, as you heard earlier, people can show up with physical symptoms and not psychiatric. So they may be going to the pediatrician or the primary care provider with many, many physical health concerns. And I have a friend who I went to medical school with who will say that if he has an individual he's treating who comes to his office more than 3 times in a year and they have no chronic medical conditions that would account for it, he always looks for depression and anxiety. Next slide, please. People sometimes don't have insurance or they have too little insurance. Sometimes people don't have a pediatrician or a primary care provider, and also not enough outreach. And that's why we're so excited to partner with you all today in this outreach activity so people can be more aware of where to get help. Next slide, please. Also, people who are late to get help, like Malkia told you, she didn't have information about health and mental health. I mean, she remembers at 18 months not smiling, but there was not a conversation about mental health in the household. And also, people are saying lack of transportation. And that's a good thing these days with COVID-19. So many mental health services, like where we work, 80% of them are provided on the telephone or online. So actually, the one silver lining to COVID-19 is to make care more accessible because transportation is a large problem to people getting help. Next slide, please. So what are the resources out there? And we will have the slides, Monique, I think will post the slides for you, but there are free mental health and substance abuse resources. One place I really like is a crisis text line, and it's just a text. It's run by a nationwide center, and they see over 300,000 people a year. and you basically just text the word START to 741-741. We have several suicide prevention hotlines. It's a national line at 1-800-273-8255. They're open 24 hours a day, and they will hook you up with local resources. If you live in Wayne, Oakland, or Macomb counties, we have telephone numbers here for that. And also, there's several different apps that are available. Mind Shift, My Strength, Operation Reach Out, and Step Away and Breathe to Relax that are available, and excellent resources for mental health. Next slide, please. Also, we have other community resources available for you and some websites that we've listed, including the Michigan 211 resource line. They have a ton of mental health resources available there. Next slide, please. And also where we are, Malkia and I work at CNS Healthcare, and we have offices in Novi, Waterford, Pontiac, Southfield, and Detroit. We provide mental health and substance abuse services to children, adolescents, adults, and older adults, and you can call us anytime at 800-615-0411 or email us at info@cnshealthcare.org, and we are on the web at www.cnshealthcare.org. You can learn more about us. Next slide, please. Also, there are some specific resources for LGBT youth, and it's called the Trevor Project, and you can call or text them. Also, during COVID-19, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration has a disaster help distress hotline, and they have a text and an email. And also, the Headspace app is really neat, and they have resources there and free of charge during the pandemic. Next slide, please. We have relationships with many community organizations around that have excellent resources about mental health and law enforcement, mental health in the African American community, mental health resources at the National Alliance for Mental Illness is NAMI, and also the American Psychiatric Association has many, even a faith-based guide they have. And also, we talked earlier about the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. SAMHSA.gov has many resources for the community on their website. Next slide, please. And also, Malkia Newman and her team, the award-winning Anti-Stigma team with Andrew Parrish and Cheryl LaFleur, we're always available to come out for presentations like that. And you can contact Malkia, and we have a phone number and email. If you have community groups, churches, or schools that are interested in presentations, we're more than happy to come out free of charge. Next slide, please. Malkia.
We also have our Facebook page, the CNS Anti-Stigma Facebook page. And any of you bookies out there that would like to like our page, we'd love for you to do that. We like to feature a lot of positive and uplifting things, videos, and pictures on our site. So we'd love to have you join us on Anti-Stigma Facebook page.
Next slide, please. Also, we have other opportunities for community training. It's about a day-long training called Mental Health First Aid, and it teaches people in the community how to recognize mental disorders and where to get help. We also have training on the ACEs also, and you can contact our community outreach department at CNS Healthcare to schedule presentations. Next slide, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
I have received one additional question, so let's ask this one. Malkia, do you have any thoughts? Could you address the divisiveness, racism, and negativity that and the toll that it's taking on everybody's mental health during, we have the Ferguson issues going on and the George Floyd issues amid the pandemic, and the violence in some communities, and the pitting the peaceful protesters against the people who are out there to create violence. Could you address, how does this divisiveness, racism, and negativity, how does that take a toll on our mental health?
It takes a tremendous toll on our mental health. And that's why we talked about trauma. Trauma can come to individuals. That's what Dr. Reed was talking about with the ACEs. But you can also, as a group of individuals like African Americans and Native Americans and Hispanic and Latinx groups of people, we have, as groups, have experienced group trauma. And the reason why we need to address this, why we need to have outlets to have honest conversations about these things, is because when people as a group go through trauma, it impacts you physically. It actually changes your DNA. They've done research and they found out, it started with Holocaust survivors, that the people who actually went through the Holocaust, even though their children never had that experience, they developed the same type of symptoms that the parents did, because the parents passed it down through the genes. So right now, with everything that's going on, first of all, this is another time where you need to put on your own air mask, take care of yourself, make sure you're in a good place, that you're handling things in a healthy way so that you can help others. I had an experience that I don't mind sharing. A good friend of mine, she's Caucasian, she called me and wanted to go out to lunch, and I didn't know why. And when I got there, we sat down at the restaurant and she was angry, very angry, didn't understand about the riots, didn't understand, what the issues were in the African American community. And at first I was taken aback. I didn't know how to react and respond. But I thought about it and I said, well, for one thing, I'm grateful that she trusts me enough that she could come to me and talk to me directly. So I wanted to interact with her in a way that was going to be educational and healing for the two of us. And sometimes we have to do that on an individual basis. When we have a national crisis that we have right now, we can't fix the nation, but we can take steps to change what's going on in our world, in our atmosphere, with the people that we're around, and not be reactionary. I prefer to be a person that's part of the solution and not a part of the problem. But in order to do that, you do have to take care of you. You have to understand why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. We need to be allowed to grieve. We've suffered many losses down through the years. There's things that need to be changed politically and in government and in policy, but we can't do it if we're in a constant state of anger, if we're abusive towards people. It's a big, big issue. But we need, just like I heard somebody say, if you want to eat an elephant, you eat it a bite at a time.
Wow, what a powerful and informative presentation. Let's all go down to the toolbar at the bottom and put our reactions. Let's give everyone a great hand. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Malkia. That was wonderful. Very timely. It's what we needed. Thank you, Malia, for giving us a shout out, clapping hands. Tatiana, thank you for clapping hands. Nyla, thank you for clapping hands. That was wonderful. Let's all clap hands for that great presentation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Wonderful. Yes, and you can even clap hands with your real hands. We haven't forgotten how to do that, have we? Beautiful. So now, and it does tie into what we talked about, is next Saturday on September 26th, we're having a virtual walkathon. And what that is we want everyone, great girls and links, to get out and move next Saturday. Go walking, do yoga, do some form of exercise for at least 30 minutes. And I heard both Dr. Michelle and Malkia talk about the importance of physical activity, how much that really helps our mental health. So let's move next Saturday. And not only let us move, but let's invite our family and friends to get involved too. With the social distancing, Obviously, we can't all be together like we normally would do for this walkathon, but maybe you can get out with 1, 2, maybe 3 people, wear your face mask, be socially distanced, and just get out and walk. For me, this weather is great because it's not too hot, it's not too cold. These are the perfect, absolute perfect days to get out and walk. And it'll be good for your physical health, your mental health, just to be out in the sunshine, in the fresh air. Let's all commit. Let me see it in the chat. How many of you commit to doing some form of exercise next Saturday, September 26th? Just 30 minutes. That's all we're asking. So let me see in the chat, who's willing to commit to doing that next Saturday? Let me see. I see Jada, Neutrina, Cheryl, Nyla. Who else? Who else is in for next Saturday? Malia, Kelly, good. Judith, 30 minutes. So maybe you'll do 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the evening, or you'll just do all 30 minutes. You can walk, dance. What about dancing? That's always fun. I see Pauline is committed. Who else is committed? Kendall, Brianna. We want you all to commit to next Saturday to virtually do 30 minutes. Monique, I know you're an exercise freak. What are you going to do next Saturday? Let's see what people are going to do. What are you going to do? Rita's committing. Aaliyah. Okay, I see Gabrielle commits to dancing. Monique. Somebody, gonna walk on Belle Isle. That's beautiful. That's always fun. Get out there in the nature. So while you're out walking or doing your physical activity, another thing we want is we want pictures. We want documentation that you're really doing this. We want to see it. We want you to share it. So in the group me that I think we're all a part of, post your pictures. Let's see what you got. Let's see what you're going to do next Saturday. If you're walking outside in the beautiful weather, take pictures. Take pictures so we see some proof that you're really committed to doing this next Saturday. And even if you don't take pictures of yourself, you don't have to take a selfie, take pictures of whoever you're walking with. Or maybe while you're outside, it's just a beautiful day. I know on Belle Isle, there are all sorts of animals that you see while you're out walking. There's the geese, there's squirrels, there's birds. I know in my neighborhood, and I live in Detroit on the east side, there are actually falcons that I see when I go walking. So that'll be a good picture to take. So take pictures and post them so we can all share and see in the group me. So let me see, who else is gonna do, I see people are gonna dance. Somebody has a trainer. Somebody's going to walk on the DeQuinder Cut. That's always fun. I see basketball and running. I see great activities. So please, please, please share your pictures of you in motion so we can see that.